what it do, good people? It is time for episode 24 of Stir Crazy, where we talk real shit about the news and tell you about all the things that are going on in the world, well, in the confines of this hour show. I'm your host, Kim Brown. Of course, it's being brought to you by the Real News Network. Coming up this hour, Republican senators have said that they will not grant any additional federal aid to the states unless Democrats ensure liability protections for businesses. That's right. The GOP says unless businesses can federally not be sued by employees returning to work should they contract coronavirus, there's not going to be any more additional aid federal from the states, for the states, that is. The fuck is going on there? We're going to get into that. Also coming up today, we've been talking a lot about how food insecurity, the people who have been dealing with food insecurity for a long time are feeling additional pressures right now as a result of mass unemployment due to the pandemic. But we've seen tremendous amounts of infection and now deaths from those working at meat processing plants. Donald Trump, through the power of the Oval Office, has insisted that these plants remain open and therefore people must continue working at risk to their own health. We're going to talk about how fucked up that is. In addition, Joe Biden's presidential candidate, his presidential campaign rather, seems to be doddering along, and he is expected to announce a VP running mate at some point in the very near future. Why are all these people clamoring to be on Joe Biden's ticket? And at what point will Democrats give serious weight to Tara Reade's allegations? We're going to discuss all that and more. Gang, don't forget to like and subscribe to us here at The Real News, especially if you're watching Stir Crazy. Of course, we have some of our folks who have been riding with us for several episodes now. So you guys keep the chat going, keep them comments coming, and we'll have a dialogue, if we will. But now it's time to bring in our fantastic panel for this Wednesday. Today we are joined with Jacqueline Lukman. She is a host producer here at The Real News. She's co-host of By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik Radio. Andrew Corkery is our visuals producer here at The Real News. Andrew's one of the smartest people that we have on our staff, so we are very lucky to have him. And Don Rojas is an executive producer also here at The Real News, bringing a wealth of knowledge and information along with him. So gang, thank you guys so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, gang, but before we get started, I want to remind you that April makes 5 years since Freddie Gray was murdered by Baltimore City Police. On Friday, we're going to be premiering a new documentary looking back at what happened to Freddie Gray and the Baltimore uprisings that came out of that. So joining us later on in the show will be producer Erica Blunt, and Twanda Jones, who is a prominent Baltimore activist, will be on with us later on in the show. But starting off, gang, Friday is May 1st, May Day, and there are a massive amount of work stoppages and walkouts of the job planned. Instacart, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Whole Foods, all these people plan on walking off the job on Friday to protest unsafe working conditions, denial of protective gear, because these people are frontline workers, obviously, and not adequate pay commiserate to working during a freaking pandemic. And joining us today to talk about some of these planned actions is Sharon Black. Now, Sharon is an organizer for the People's Power Assembly, and she's also a former Amazon worker. She has been quoted recently in the New York Times, but Sharon also worked as a picker at Amazon. She was forced out through write-ups based on speed. She's also a registered nurse and a former food production worker and a UFCW shop steward. We'd like to welcome our union sister. Sharon, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Fantastic, Sharon. So I wanted to start with your experience working at Amazon and getting into some of the reasons why Amazon workers have been agitating so hard for better working conditions, better pay, and the reluctance from Jeff Bezos and this ginormous corporation that is Amazon to give in to some of those demands. Tell us about what's happening on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, Friday, actually, there's a lot of anger around Friday because Bezos and Amazon have announced to all of its employees that if you've been on leave of absence, or because maybe your kids have been off school because they have no choice, or because you have an older relative to take care of, or you're older and you're nervous about getting coronavirus, you have to come back on May 1st or you lose your job. That's been like the newest news. And on May 15th, they're telling workers at Amazon that the extra money, which is not enough money, it's not real genuine hazard pay because right now the extra $2 is less than the money that people got as bonuses during the holiday period, like Christmas, for instance.
Hey Sharon,
So,
sweetie, I'm
yeah.
so sorry. I don't mean to disrupt you, but actually, I want you to start over because we had a bit of a sound glitch.
Oh, okay.
Okay, okay,
Oh, no
okay. Go ahead.
problem.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No problem. I was saying that May 1st is not only International Workers' Day, and this week has also been Memorial Workers' Day for workers who've lost their lives on the job, but May 1st is also the deadline that Amazon and Jeff Bezos have given workers to return who may have been on leave of absence. For instance, a lot of folks may have stayed off because of taking care of sick relatives or they have children to take care of. Well, they're now told all workers have to come back on May 1st or they'll lose their jobs. May 15th, they set as a date to take away the extra money that they were giving to new hires and those working these dangerous conditions. They're going to take that away too. And I have to add, a lot of this that Bezos and Amazon says is just purely PR because the $2 extra that they touted as so great to people, literally they paid more at Christmas time for bonus, holiday time. So as you said, I was a picker, and that's we've been working with some folks. Rasika, who's will be on a press conference tomorrow, another worker inside right now, who wrote a series of demands to Amazon, and one of them was to increase the amount of hazard pay, but also addressing some of the questions like people have not been tested. We've heard back that in some cases, people have masks on and gloves on the first floor, if anyone knows anything about the area. But at the fourth and third and second level, some of these so called safety things don't even exist. And as it's been reported to us by Rasika and others, social distancing or physical distancing is actually pretty much impossible there. The other thing, because I was a picker, is that one of our demands is to lower the rate because you can be fired if you don't keep up with the pace. And so if you don't want to make mistakes or you want to wash your hands or you want to use hand sanitizer, you're going to slow down and you can be written up, which I was. So anyhow, that is some of what's happening in Amazon. And people know about what's been taking place at the poultry plants and some of the meat packing plants. It's been horrendous and workers are dying. And so May 1st will probably be mark a day where there'll be a number of walkouts and work related work stoppages. Hopefully on the scale that there was when the immigrants revived May Day. So we'll see Friday rather. And in Baltimore City, there's going to be a caravan. 1199 is going to participate in it. We are a lot of other frontline workers that people forget about, like sanitation workers, the postal workers. And we're going to be going to the different sites to recognize workers because people don't always recognize the work that people do. Now suddenly people are considered essential, but they're not essential enough to get a living wage even.
Hey, I'm wondering, like the working conditions you described in an Amazon factory, that's like under normal conditions.
Right.
And then Amazon threw in this $2 an hour raise. Not, I'm doing air quotes because it's $2 an hour. Taxes eat that up.
Right.
As if that was supposed to appease workers who are continuing to come to work in the midst of a pandemic, not necessarily so much because people want to serve. That's how the CEO of Walmart framed it when asked, why are people still coming to work? And his answer was, well, because people want to serve, but it's because people need to eat.
Right.
And are you expecting, if there is a large turnout, a large workout of workers from a walkout of workers from Amazon, are you expecting like mass firings as a response from Amazon?
Well, it's interesting because there was firings in Staten Island, as most people are aware of. Chris Smalls was fired, and there's been other instances where people have been fired. Out in Minneapolis, they got one of the workers back. So it's hard to say whether there'll be mass firings. You never know with them. When we were out at the gates in Baltimore, they sent so many security people out that they outnumbered even workers. So sometimes that's an issue too. I think it's unknown. I think it's an unknown question. And I think it's an important question because if it happens, what workers rely on is the support from the community. And we'll need that support. So actually, May 1st this is an ongoing fight. This is not something that's just going to happen on May 1st. And we don't know whether people will be intimidated, how large walkouts will be, or who can do what. The other thing they're urging is that folks not shop on May 1st. Don't buy from Amazon, don't buy anywhere. A lot of this came out of the Jackson Co-op in Mississippi, and they, asked people not to pay their rent, not to shop on this day, and to support workers around the country. So it's manifested many different ways from LA to New York City, even like I said, here in Baltimore. But it's a very, very good question. And you're totally right. It's like $2 is nothing. It is nothing. Not if you lose your life, not if you bring a virus back to your children or elderly parents or anyone else in your family. And actually, there's been positive cases, and there's been cases of workers are dying on the job. I mean, everybody's aware of the grocery workers and the young woman out in that recently died. These cases are so heartbreaking. I can barely talk about them because it's like people aren't getting recognized, and there's no reason. I went to Target and was talking to the workers in Target and looking at their situation. They are angry, and one of the workers told me, I don't want to die for what we get, and they're not even getting the $2. Some of them are getting paid, I'd say between $11 and $12 is what the average Target worker gets. And at the time that I went, maybe it's changed. Maybe they have gloves now. Maybe they have masks. But there was only one worker with a mask on at Target, and none of the plexiglass that some of the union places like Giants were forced to put up, which I must say have only been because of the union. And I know UFCW fought the governor about getting grocery workers declared essential so that they could get free daycare and other kinds of services like first dibs on PPE and that kind of thing.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Sharon? Sorry.
Or Don.
No, I just wanted to commend Sharon and her union comrades for the planned action coming up on Friday. Friday is an enormously significant day in the life of working class people around the world. And it's good to see that it is being marked this year with protests, with anti capitalist protests, because what's been happening is one of the consequences of the pandemic is that it has in fact sharpened the class struggle. And you see a growing resistance on the part of working people to these constant attacks. I mean, there's Trump and his minions are waging a class warfare against working people in the United States, but working people are standing up and fighting back. And so all power to the union movement, and wish you guys much success with your actions on Friday.
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up question. What is the extent of knowledge that you think, the Amazon workers and other people protesting, on May Day have about the day of May Day and its history in the United States? And do you think it's best that we kind of better educate people as to what that should mean in the United States, given that there is this sort of overlying anti-socialist, anti-left sentiment in the United States when it comes to May Day, and why we don't particularly usually celebrate it in the United States?
Good question. And I think there is a lot of, how can you say it, different consciousness amongst people, especially depending on regions where people know more about these things, or people have been bolder, and so they kind of have knowledge about what Mayday stands for. I would say that my own experiences locally is that it's mixed. Some people have heard about it. I have to say that probably here locally, it's more about the genuine anger that people feel at their own individual conditions more than having a broader consciousness of it. But that's up to those of us who have that consciousness to continue to try to educate. And it's not going to be like a one-shot deal to raise those issues, the broader issues. But I think people are very, very open right now. I think people do not support the status quo, and the tragedy of right now, the tragedy of how things are unfolding in this country, which Don Rojas touched on, is so enormous that it's going to change consciousness. And my best hope in all this pain and suffering is that we can come out more organized and more able to fight, and with the consciousness that you're talking about. But I think it's mixed. And there's always this element that you hide your pain, that you don't admit that you're upset about stuff. So it's sort of, and then you have to. Okay, I kind of going back a little bit on here locally, and also you have to realize something, that in Baltimore City, what Amazon is doing is insidious. This city is so exploited, so impoverished, that people even think if they get a job at Amazon, it's a good thing. So you got that kind of consciousness too working against you. In terms of organizing. On the other hand, $2 is nothing, and it's certainly nothing to die. You could die. So because like on many things, there's a lot of contradictions going on. But that'll be up to those of us who have been fighting for justice for some time to make those connections and to not give up and to keep trying and trying, because it's desperately needed right now. The solidarity and people getting together.
Sharon, we have a question for you from the YouTube comments. It comes from our own climate reporter, Steve Horn. Steve wants to know, is it moral to still shop at Amazon anymore, given the way that they behave as a company, both before and after COVID-19? Not to mention Jeff Bezos's obscene level of wealth, akin to a modern pharaoh. Is it moral or ethical for people to shop at Amazon, given the way that workers have been treated now and before?
Okay, I'm going to answer that a couple different ways. We're working with Amazon United, and they have called for people not to shop on May 1, and that's been the general call out. What I think the most immoral thing, literally the most immoral thing, is Bezos. I mean, I look at these things, these billionaires, there's no reason a billionaire should even exist. I mean, it's ludicrous. I'm looking, he's building some kind of $10 million clock under a mountain. What kind of, I don't know what you call it. It's like narcissism or whatever you want to call it, exists amongst these billionaires, that they can ignore everything that's happening. So I can't, I'm not going to go on record and say never shop there. But you be your own guide to your own ethics and what you think is right and wrong to do. I say shut them all down so that, the people can operate it, and it'll be very fine to shop at Amazon. But I think that the real morality, is not the person who may buy or not buy. When I worked there, it always shocked me, and I had to think that it's part of our capitalist culture that Don spoke about. And that is that iceware. The amount of junk that passed through my picking station that I had to deal with just made me think there are people out in Omaha, Idaho. I don't know. I'm not disparaging any state or what have you. People who have nothing to do, and their lives are so much based on consuming, and it's their connection to human beings, that there's just so much buying. And if you worked in Amazon and you saw the junk that we would pick and process and send out, you would be like shocked at the waste. But I think that culture exists, that you have to look at the people at top. They're the ones, I think, who have the ethics problem. People at the bottom that are doing it are mostly are victims of it. But, be your own judge. about what you want to do. I'm not shopping, but
Mhm.
Understood. Okay. Well, listen, gang, May 1st, May Day,
yep.
we are standing in solidarity with all the workers across the nation, really across the world, who are
Right.
standing up for their rights, their demands to be kept safe at the workplace, their demands to be paid commiserate to the level of risk that they are assuming in these pandemic times. And we'd like to thank Sharon Black for stopping by and sharing with us some of the what's and the whys behind these May Day protests happening on Friday. She's an organizer with the People's Power Assembly. Sharon, we thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with us.
Thank you, Kim Brown. I'll see you all on Friday.
Yeah, all right. Very good.
Solidarity.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks for our wonderful crew who booked Sharon to speak with us. And gang, we're talking about workers and the just unprecedented amounts of struggles that people are dealing with right now during the pandemic, which has been compounded by the utter gross failure of our incompetent leaders, not just in the White House, but trickling right on down. And we've been talking about the meatpacking people, people who work at food processing plants, now under executive order to remain at work. Andrew, let's start with you. So please tell us, what did Trump say, and why the fuck did he say it?
Yeah, so it's really kind of a bit of a convoluted situation. And according to the Washington Post, Trump signed this executive order, basically, quote, compelling meat processors to remain open to head off shortages in the nation's food supply chains, despite mounting reports of plant worker deaths due to COVID-19. And sort of very ominously, Trump invoked, the Defense Production Act, which he had previously just not too long ago refused to deploy on the behalf of commandeering factories to make hospital equipment. So this was a decision in which Trump, basically decides that one person or one group of people is more expendable than the other for whatever particular calculus that he's making, which is completely immoral. And it's very interesting, particularly as it relates to the meatpacking plants, because Iowa, which is a Republican state, went for Trump, is currently experiencing some of the fastest growing rates of COVID-19 infections in America, particularly in the city of Waterloo, which has been really hard hit. And the reason why is because the meatpacking plants in these cities are, major vectors for disease spreading, and not surprisingly, because considering that slaughterhouses are seriously notorious for sites that have poor health and safety practices. And the closing of the Tyson plant in Waterloo on April 22nd was forced on the company as employees refused to go to work, kind of tying back into the unprecedented amount of pro worker and pro health, regulation and pro workers' rights rallying that we're seeing right now around May Day, and particularly dealing with this crisis. And there was just a ridiculous amount of people that contracted the disease at this Tyson food plant. And now Trump is just kind of going in the wind of everything and saying that, to hell with it. We have to get these people back in order to get our, meat supply back in order to shore up the supply chains. When in reality, this is something he directly decided not to do when it came to, impacting healthcare workers and making sure that people have enough PPE and people have enough supplies in order to stop the spread of this pandemic.
Yeah, this whole thing is just like, dude, if people cannot see the absolute evil at the root of capitalism, not just Trump, I don't want people to make this just about Donald Trump, because people, I think, need to understand how anti-human and against workers industries like food processing have always been. Smithfield was one of the companies that shut down, I think, last week. Smithfield has a long history. Smithfield, the headquarters is down in Tar Heel, North Carolina, has a long history of union busting, sexual harassment, racial discrimination, they literally separated Black and Latino workers, and they would tell the Black workers that the Latinos didn't want, a pay raise or something like that, and they tell the Latino workers, well, the Blacks didn't want it, and then they'd have these groups of workers against each other. So that that made it difficult for workers to unionize, but they've been trying to unionize for almost 2 decades. And this, at Smithfield in particular, there's a long sordid history of the evils that were going on at the Smithfield plant. But meat processing and food processing operations in the United States are particularly insidious in regard to the violation of workers' rights, because a lot of those jobs are low paid. They are filled by a lot of poor white people, poor Black people, and a lot of immigrants. So there were a lot of abuses going on in these places before, where people were afraid to speak up about those abuses.
Yeah,
So now coronavirus hits and people are literally like getting infected with this virus and dying. And people don't want to die for a paycheck, even if they are afraid of the management, or in the case of our immigrant brothers and sisters, afraid of being deported.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So this is, coronavirus has like exposed the festering sore
Yeah.
that was underneath the scab of capitalism. And I just really just don't want people to think that these are awful things because of Donald Trump. No, these were awful industries in the first place.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Hey, Don,
Yeah.
hold on 1 second, babe. I'm gonna let you get in because I want us to play a clip from the partner of a meat packing plant employee who actually passed away due to coronavirus. And really, her testimony is heartbreaking. So let's go to that real quick, Dwayne.
Hugo was a wonderful person. He was always taking care of our family. He didn't want to stop. He was still working. He want to work a lot for our kids. I would like to make justice for him because he worked many, many years. I know him since 2004, and he was working there. And the supervisors, the big supervisors know them, that he was always there. They call him, he was there. He was always there for the company.
When I saw that video, it actually literally broke my heart. He was always there for the company. That is Blanca Pata Gonzalez. Her partner, his name was Hugo Dominguez. He is one of 2 workers who died from coronavirus working at the Quality Sausage Meat Processing Plant in Texas. Don, I know you wanted to get in. What is your reaction?
Well, as you said, it is heartrending to listen to that woman and her loss. The meatpacking industry in this country, the working conditions inside of those factories are among the worst. They are simply atrocious. Not only are the workers packed into the factories like sardines, I mean, working less than a foot away from each other. Talk about 6 feet of social distancing. That ain't happening in any of these factories. The amount of work that goes in to a daily production of a given work in the factory is unbelievable. Try to wrap your head around this. Each worker, male and female, is supposed to produce up to 10,000 cuts a day. Cutting raw meat 10,000 times in a given day. That's your job. And the noise in the factory is so loud that to go to the bathroom, you have to whisper into the ears of your supervisor. And the supervisor will then make a decision as to whether he or she would allow you to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's just unspeakable, the conditions there. And so I'm very happy to see that some of the unions in the meatpacking industry have begun to fight back and to reveal what the realities are like. for the workers in these factories, and they are beginning to fight back. Let's see if there'll be any kind of work action in the meatpacking industry come May 1st. I'm hopeful. I'm not certain about that, but I'm hopeful that that could happen. And then this business about Trump using an executive order to keep those plants open. You talk about here's another round of attacks against workers coming from the White House, coming from this white supremacist White House. It is really shocking.
Yeah, I would just add on top of that too, like in relation to Trump. I think it's important to kind of underscore part of what Jacqueline was saying, in that Trump is doing this, but I think because Trump is so reckless in how he operates in vehemently opposing all elements of the working class to large degree, he's just exposing the the sick sort of benevolent mask that had previously existed, over top of some of these more neoliberal, archetype candidates that we've been getting, like the Joe Bidens of the world. And my hope is that, maybe because Trump is just so damn terrible in, literally adversarially going after these workers who are the definition of the downtrodden in our society and the looked over, and some of the people that he said on the campaign that he was going to try to take care of. And he's forcing his will through executive order to force these people back into work in the middle of a pandemic without even understanding the kind of massive amount of health trauma and physical and emotional despair that these people are going to go through because of it. And I hope that people kind of learn from that in some way, that this system already existed and he is just showing us this system in the most naked, defamatory way imaginable,
Yeah. And here's the big irony. Yeah. Go ahead.
We have
Go ahead,
we have a comment from YouTube from Reptile Z. They say, next, the government will start shipping in prisoners to work in meatpacking plants. That doesn't sound all that far-fetched.
That's right.
Capitalism does not lack for creativity. But Jackie, I know you want to get back in here, and I'm going to get to you in just a moment. But I wanted to throw to another clip from the same press conference that we saw. And both of these clips, by the way, are from the Dallas Morning News. And this is Carlos Quintanilla. Now, he is a community activist in the Dallas area, and he makes... You really just need to listen to what Carlos has to say. Let's check him out.
They put production and profits before the safety of their workers. There was pressure to produce because people were not showing up to work. They had to deliver the product. They had to finish. And so they didn't say, we're going to stop, on April 17th because we have people who are complaining of illness. They kept on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing their families to come out to work. They even gave them a bonus of $1,000 to encourage them to work, knowing that there was contamination. They said, here's $1,000. Come to work. This is a bonus. And then the second part is that they haven't made any public statement to the media or anyone regarding the 1 million+ pounds of meat. That's a critical issue. Why haven't they made a public statement saying, you know what, there's been contamination, there's been 52 people who have tested positive for COVID, 2 people have died, we have produced over 1 million pounds of meat, we're recalling all this meat back because it's possibly contaminated. They have not done that. How much more negligent can you be than that?
Okay. Look, when the stay-at-home orders first were issued and we were going and stocking up on our supplies, we went to Costco, my personal happy place aside from Aldi. And I was mad because there was no chicken. There were no chicken thighs. We eat chicken thighs in this house. We don't like white meat because we're Black and that's how we are. So there were no chicken thighs. There was no chicken to be found. And I'm pissed off. And then I had to think about it. And I was like, you know what? People are sick. People are sick and people are not able to go to work to produce my chicken. So maybe I can shut the fuck up and not have chicken for a while. And then and I was cool with that. But then I see these anti-stay-at-home order protests, and I had this brilliant idea. If these people who were protesting these stay-at-home orders and they want the governments, the states to be open back up, why don't they get their asses down there on the line at these meat processing plants and in the fields where our migrant brothers and sisters are still out there picking our vegetables for us with no protection provided for them. If they want to, businesses to be open back up, well, then why don't they get their asses on the front line and do that work? But that's not what they wanted. They weren't protesting that businesses be back open. They were protesting because they want to continue to be served. And that's all this is. They understand that it's not them and their family members and the politicians' family members who are going to be contracting this virus because they're going to be forced to go to work. They don't care who it is as long as they get their haircut and their burger. And I mean, at some point, I know, in this political conversation, we have to be like, oh, we have to reach out to people and try to make them understand. Fuck that. These people want us to die. I don't understand why we need to have any kind of understanding with people who literally do not care whether someone else lives or dies so they can have a convenience. I can go without meat. If it means my brothers and sisters will die to get it to the table for me, I can go without meat. But I can't live with these folks protesting, talking about they need a haircut, so they want the barbershops to be open. No, get your ass down to that meatpacking plant and cut up some meat if you're that committed to opening the businesses again.
Dwayne, I want to hear from the gentleman. This was outside of Chicago, who works at Tyson Chicken. It's really quick, but very poignant.
They told me that everything was okay, and they told me I'll have a better chance of catching the coronavirus going out to Walmart than in Tyson. Come to work, you safe.
Come to work, you safe. I mean, that is basically what big business, corporations, the Republican establishment, parts of the Democratic establishment, depending on who you're talking to, the lady in Las Vegas, the mayor, who was a former Democrat, now independent, she'd have lost her rabbit ass mind trying to make the casinos and restaurants and make the strip open up. And she asked, they asked her, well, what's the plan? She said, it ain't my casino. Shouldn't be my plan. So we are seeing a dearth of leadership really from across the country. And of course, it comes from Trump. But one notable piece of shit who has been piece of shitting for decades now in Congress is the senior senator from Kentucky. His name is Mitch McConnell. Now, I know if you watch The Real News, you share a mutual disdain that we all have.
For the turtle man.
For the turtle man. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Mitch McConnell has never been shy about siding with big business against people, against the environment, against workers. And he has reinforced this. He appeared on Fox News this week, and he was asked about giving additional aid to the states. Obviously, we know that people's unemployment is going to start to run dry soon. We also know that small businesses have not been have their needs adequately met in terms of economic relief coming from the federal government. But here's his response about what the impasse is in Congress between Democrats and Republicans. Let's hear from Mitch McConnell.
So let me make it perfectly clear. We are open to considering another bill. But my red line in going forward on this bill is we need to provide protection, litigation protection, for those who've been on the front line, hospitals, doctors, nurses. And imagine you're a businessman thinking about reopening, and you've heard that the trial lawyers all over the country are sharpening their pencils, getting ready to sue you, claiming that you didn't engage in proper distancing or other issues related to health and safety. Look, we can't pass another bill unless we have liability protections, and that's the only way we're going to ultimately begin to get past this, and that is to begin to open up the economy again. We have to have businesses brave enough to open up again, employees brave enough to go back to work, And I'm glad to see that some of the states are beginning to move in the direction of reopening.
Now, what was interesting about this segment on Fox News, and don't ask me who the reporter was because I don't pay attention to them jokers over at Fox News. I don't know what his name is, but the reporter asked him during the course of this interview more than once, more than twice, to clarify his statements. Like, did you say what I thought you said? That you don't want to have protections for workers, but you want to have protections in businesses so they don't get sued by employees who are forced to return to work during the midst of a pandemic, and there's no federal mandated protections in place for workers. And Mitch McConnell was like, I said what I said. So everything he just said in that clip, he meant it, Don Rojas. I know this is not shocking.
This is the same Mitch McConnell. Remember, this is the same guy who a couple months ago came out with a strong statement against reparations for African Americans in this country. And then 2 days after he made a statement, it was revealed that in his family ancestry, his great-grandfather was a slaveholder. A slaveholder. All right. So this man comes from a long line of white supremacists in the state of Kentucky. It doesn't surprise me or any of us, for that matter, that he would take an anti-worker stand like he's doing now, because the capitalists of today were the slaveholders of yesterday, and there's a through line that goes from one generation to the next, right down to today. So where Mitch McConnell's real interests lie. And also his wife. His wife has been involved in a lot of corrupt activities as a Secretary of Labor when she was in Trump administration. But that's a whole other story.
Andrew, there was a really good piece in Truth Out just outlining all the different ways that Mitch McConnell is the grand wizard of the deplorables. Can you enlighten us, please?
Yeah, he truly is like the grand wizard and the ringleader and whatever other word you want to throw in there to kind of make sure that that he's running this shit. Yeah, so there's a really interesting piece in Truth Out called McConnell's War on America. I encourage everyone to go check it out. But part of the article is actually quoted saying this. I think that this is a really interesting part. I thought this could have been the lead as well. The lead was great on the article, but this could have been the lead also. This is the quote: "COVID does not care who you voted for, but Trump does, and he seems happily willing to increase the nation's suffering while helping to expand the reach of the pandemic in order to settle some grudges and score some points with his weirdly death-seeking base." So I thought that was pretty aptly described. Our friends at Truth Out also described this particular war with McConnell, who Trump is also a part of, as, quote, "not being waged against COVID-19, the pandemic that has killed tens of thousands of people in this nation alone. Their war is being waged against the nation itself, and specifically against areas of the nation that are heavy on population but light on Trump supporters." So this should be a battle against a global pandemic, but it's really a political battle to settle Trump and McConnell's grudges and to use the power of the federal government, which they claim shouldn't have any influence on society, to have the utmost influence on society to kill people. Basically, is what they're doing. The issue has kind of come to a head for both parties as governors across the country who are not fans of Trump are screaming that they need, desperately needed federal aid for, to get their states back in order and to deal with this crisis. So Congress, particularly the Republican Senate, has been dragging its feet over, passing this bill that McConnell was talking about to provide states with, specific aid, because doing so, like kind of Don laid out before, is that it goes directly against their ideology. So it's not surprising when McConnell and his crew kind of come to this conclusion that, we don't want to help workers. No, this has been baked in from the beginning. We already know that they don't want to help workers. This is part of their overarching world theory and their ideology that puts the business class and puts the capitalist class and the former slaveholders, as you guys are talking about, on top of the food chain and on top of the capitalist pyramid that they constantly try to convince their base that they can get to the top of. But it's unfortunate because so many of these people think that they can become those people in the capitalist class, but in reality, it's just a smokescreen to try to divide people, honestly. And so the problem is that, you know, they used a lot of these wedge issues that have fundamental, you know, problems in them that need to be addressed, you know, like gender disparity and like, you know, race issues and things like that. But they use those as weapons to turn their supporters into militant, you know, people who support their ideology that is destroying their own supporters. So it's sort of this, you know, semi-fascistic ideology that is also a bit cannibalistic in a way, in that the people that they're trying to, you know, stop from gaining support from are ultimately, you know, dying as well.
Yeah,
so
it's one of those bitter ironies of
yeah,
of
exactly.
modern day capitalism. Yeah, where you have a capitalist racist regime in Washington, and it's not just in the White House; it's in Congress, in the Senate as well, and in the Supreme Court as well. That has pulled a massive con game, and they've been able to get away with it by conning working people in this country, mostly white working class people, into believing that they are, in fact, have their interests at heart and that their public policies are advancing the interests of working people. It is the grossest of gross lies that has been told, you know, to the American people, and that lie has to be ripped apart, you know, and just totally destroyed. But
Yeah.
it's a sad irony.
Yeah, I mean
Jackie?
the you know, the strategy that destroyed Bacon's rebellion worked. That's why they keep using it. I mean, that's why that's why they don't do anything new. They do exactly what Don and Andrew just said. They prey on the insecurities and the prejudices of working class white people. Not that all working class white people are all prejudiced, but when you have people who are economically insecure and they don't know who to blame, it's easy to suggest to them, well, it's that group of people over there.
Exactly. Point of
It's
finger.
very
It's
easy
the
to
other.
manipulate people who are struggling and hungry and afraid of where their next meal and whether they're gonna be able to keep a roof over their head, and it's easy to manipulate those people into believing who their enemy should be. This is why countries that have a stronger leftist, stronger social safety net are in fact leaning more toward socialism, have a stronger grasp on the ideas of imperialism, the ideas of the problems with capitalism, and have a much stronger working class, a much stronger idea of class solidarity and who their enemies really are. We don't have that in this country because the land owning elite have always made the rules here. So they've always made sure that everybody who isn't a landowning elite doesn't ever get the whole story about how the landowning elite screws everybody else. So you've got
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell coming out here talking about, you know, that we're not going to pass another stimulus bill unless there's liability, a liability waiver for businesses. I mean, he knows that people are going to die. That's why he wants the liability waiver in there, so businesses can't be sued when people do die. You know, he did this same bunch of legislators are now trying to say that they're not going to provide any more assistance to the states that continue to that continue to declare themselves sanctuary cities, right? So in this country, we have dealt with centuries of a fractured class analysis. We've got too many broke people aligning with the rich and the powerful, thinking that if we work hard enough, we're going to become like them. And the rich and the powerful have always been our enemy, but now they're just like, fuck it. Why even pretend like we care? Let's just put it all out there and do it. And the only choice we have now is to form real, solid class solidarity and kick them all out. That's the only choice we have now.
Yeah.
Hey, gang, we got to move along because I do want us to get to Erica and Tawanda. They are standing by to talk about this Friday's premiere of the Freddie Gray documentary produced by The Real News. But before we get to them, I have to talk about Joe Biden real quick because Joe Biden is expected to name a running mate, a VP choice. Joe Biden is also under increased scrutiny and criticism regarding the sexual assault allegations made by a former staffer of his, Tara Reid, who says that Biden sexually assaulted her in the 90s. And there's been a number of reports coming out revealing that Tara Reid shared this experience with people at the time and in the years after. Now, the Biden camp has firmly denied her allegations. They said that it never happened. It's not true. And at the same time, Joe Biden is facing a lot of pressure from fellow Democrats to pick a woman as his running mate, more specifically a Black woman as his running mate. And the former gubernatorial candidate in Georgia, Stacey Abrams, she's trying to make a case for herself out there on the national news circuit. This was her exchange with CNN's Don Lemon. And I fucking hate CNN. I never watch CNN. It is like my least. If you want to torture me, make me watch CNN, okay? But to Don Lemon's credit, he did ask her some very pointed questions, and you won't be surprised by her answer, but you'll definitely want to hear it.
Assault allegation against Joe Biden. The accuser, her name is Tara Reid, tells CNN that the alleged incident happened in 1993 while she was working as an aide in Biden's Senate office. She is claiming that she was delivering Biden a duffel bag and says that Biden had her up against the wall in a corridor on the Hill and violated her with his fingers. Now, CNN has now spoken on the record with her former neighbor, who says Reid told her about the allegation within a few years of the alleged incident. Biden's campaign says untrue, never happened. Is this a credible allegation?
I believe that women deserve to be heard, and I believe that they need to be listened to. But I also believe that those allegations have to be investigated by credible sources. The New York Times did a deep investigation, and they found that the accusation was not credible. I believe Joe Biden. I believe that he is a person who has demonstrated that his love of family, his love of our community has been made perfectly clear through his work as a congressional leader and as an American leader. I know Joe Biden, and I think that he is telling the truth and that this did not happen.
So in 2018, you tweeted it was shameful that Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination was being rushed forward and survivors of violence like Christine Blasey Ford deserve to have their voices heard. Are you applying a different standard now?
Not at all. I believe then and I believe now that women deserve to be heard because too often they are not. And Tara Reid deserved to have her story listened to and investigated. What was happening to Christine Blasey Ford was that there was no investigation. There was a rush to move the conversation forward so that no investigation was conducted. And as I said, I believe that those allegations needed to be investigated. And I believe that the New York Times and subsequent reports support what the Biden campaign has said. And I believe Joe Biden.
Okay. Another little addition to that. James Clyburn today in a NBC News report says that it is important for Joe Biden to select a woman as his running mate. It does not have to be a Black woman. It's not a must. It's not a must is a direct quote. Gang, in the interest of time, we're going to make this a bit of a lightning round. So I want to start with Jackie. We'll go to Don, and then we'll wrap it with Andrew. Jackie, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
House Negroes. That's my thought. There you go. House Negroes. The Black, that what you just saw, that is the Black political misleadership class. That's what they do.
Well, she certainly is lobbying hard for the job. There's no doubt about that. In the same night that she was on CNN, she was also on MSNBC. And, she's clearly playing to his campaign. And we'll see how that plays out. But Biden is under a lot of pressure from not only from the senior Black politicians in the Democratic Party, but also from some others in the more progressive civil rights community. who are pressuring him to choose a black woman as his running mate. So he may end up doing that, but it then becomes either Tracy or Stacey or Kamala Harris. So that's your pick.
Yeah,
Andrew.
I just real quick, I think, first of all, I'm not sure how many times she had to recite that answer to one of her political consultants before she actually went onto CNN. But A plus on that, because that first part of that answer sounded like it was pretty much on script without flaw. So that's the first part of my response to that. Second part is that we actually, here at The Real News, we did an interview with Ryan Grimm, the Washington bureau chief of the Intercept, and he was talking about in his, and we were talking to him about his new book, which you guys should go check out. But he was talking about the differences in the way that the Kavanaugh situation and this Biden situation have taken on political motivations in different ways, and how the outcome of each, in terms of the response from quote unquote liberals, people who vote for the Democratic Party, has been totally flipped. So I think that the problem is the more that the liberals continue to do that, to flip their response similarly to what the Republicans did when the allegations against Roy Moore came out, they kind of don't have the credibility that they used to when they want to get up in arms about a particular situation involving sexual assault. And so I think that's a problem in terms of, being able to make sure that we do in fact listen to women's allegations and to go through them properly and to make sure that they are heard, but also make sure that people are held accountable at the end of the day. So I think that that's a problem when certain parts of the liberal progressive spectrum, I don't know what to call it, but they think that it's okay, to kind of give Biden a pass on this because it's politically advantageous for them. It's only going to serve the right wing when the next right wing person has to deal with something like this.
I got something to say, but I'm actually not going to say it because it'd be a little crass, and I know my mother's watching, so I will keep that to myself for the time being. But gang, so April of 2015, 25-year-old Freddie Gray tragically lost his life after he was brutalized by police and ended up dying of a severed spinal cord. Here at The Real News, we have done a 5-year retrospective of not only Freddie Gray, but the Baltimore uprisings that followed that grasped international and national attention. Let's take a preview of that.
I have to say that the killing of Freddie Gray was not right. I mean, I miss him so much.
So many people there at his funeral. I was glad that he had so much of love and support.
It really was a watershed moment. Baltimore has a long history of uprisings, of rioting, of people pushing back, of racial conflict in many ways. The culmination of not only the long arc of Baltimore's history playing itself out repeatedly, but also the Black Lives Matter movement with the non-indictments of the officers that killed Mike Brown in Ferguson, the officers that killed Eric Gardner in New York.
400 years of resentment built up in folks, and every community, every person has a breaking point.
Police the police because they cannot police themselves.
And joining us right now to discuss this and what's changed or not changed in Baltimore City since the murder of Freddie Gray, we're joined today with Tawanda Jones. She is the sister of Tyrone West. He was killed by Baltimore police, and his sister has taken up the mantle to make sure that everybody knows his story by having weekly protests called West Wednesdays. And we're also joined today with Erica Blunt. Erica is a producer of Rattling the Bars, a program right here on The Real News, and she helped produce this documentary that is going to premiere here on our channel on Friday. Ladies, thank y'all so much for being here. Take yourself off mute, ladies. There we go. we living in a brand new world, girls. Brand new world. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we go.
Can
Yes,
you hear me?
yes.
Okay.
So, Erica, I want to start with you because you've compiled this labor of love and compassion really for the city. I mean, Baltimore went through a collective traumatic event when Freddie Gray was killed, and in the ensuing really months and years afterwards, especially the weeks with the uprising, and then the National Guard called into Baltimore, and then the officers tried, one mistrial, others acquitted. It was just a saga that the city really went through collectively. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I actually covered the uprisings, the protests, the trial itself, and what was interesting about it is that the uprising is what brought the national and international media to Baltimore, and it was a catalyst, or in some ways, for change, and we have young people to thank for that, but a lot of people descended on Baltimore, including media, but also people who wanted to donate money and help in other ways, and then they disappeared. So the documentary examines, what happened, why it happened, and then some of the grassroots people who, carried the torch after all of these people who, had a sudden interest in what was going on in Baltimore and the poverty and all this, all of the issues in terms of redlining and just entrenched poverty that no one else, that no one had been interested in before the uprisings. And so, we talked to people like Tawanda, who has been doing West Wednesdays since her brother was killed by police, and peaceful demonstrations for years that the media did not pay attention to. We talked to Lawrence Brown and Heber Brown, who, Heber Brown had started food co-ops and farming and looked at that as a way of resistance, particularly now in a pandemic where people are trying to get food, and toilet paper and other things, but that's another story. And, we talked to, people who were really on the ground and continue to be on the ground, and talk to them about, has there been change in the last 5 years? And if not, what are the obstacles? Who are the people? What happened to all the politicians that were calling our young people thugs, that were claiming that they were going to now pump resources into neglected areas? That what happened to the DOJ report? So that will air Friday at 7 p.m. We're going to have a live discussion around all those issues. Feel free to come and do the chat and all the other modern technology things that I'm still working on.
Tawanda, yeah, are you there, babe? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, first of all, Tawanda, it's nice to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. You have been impacted firsthand by police brutality and a failure to see justice through the criminal justice system. Can you talk to us about what happened to your brother? Because as Erica mentioned, the national media didn't come to Baltimore because a black man was killed by the police. They came because Baltimore started tearing shit up out of frustration and out of a justifiable rage. But talk to us about your experience. Talk and tell us what happened to your brother Tyrone.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. And before Freddie Gray, unfortunately, my brother Tyrone West was brutally murdered on July the 18th, 2013, by 11 to 15 Baltimore City police officers, as well as one Morgan State University officer. And like my sister Erica said, we've been doing peaceful protests for 352 weeks now, nonstop, and just for accountability. Because what happened to my brother Tyrone West shouldn't have never happened. I won't wish this type of pain on anyone. And as you can clearly see, transparency wasn't there, accountability, culpability, none of those were there for my family. But when we saw from day one that this is not just Baltimore thing. It's a worldwide thing, and it needs to stop. And it's about holding folks accountable. And that's why we opened up the platform of West Wednesday, my family, my supporters, just to give people a chance, a platform to talk about police misconduct, and more importantly, try to do things to change things. So it's sad, but we just got to keep on fighting. That's the only thing. That's the only way I know it. We got to keep on fighting peacefully, collectively, and just build on that.
Gang, from the YouTube comments, Jane Russ says we need a real civilian oversight board above all police departments. You won't get any disagreement from this panel. Gang, if you guys want to hop in with questions for Erica and Tawanda, feel free.
Yeah, I just would like to add to what I think is really needed is community control over the police, because a review board doesn't really have a whole lot of authority, but community control over the police determines who gets fired, who gets hired, what kind of discipline is meted out when the police step out of line. And I absolutely hope that these are efforts that are um, advocated for in Baltimore. Tawana, I know your work, and I'm always glad to see you. And Erica, thank you so much for doing this documentary, because my husband and I came down to Baltimore the day after I think the indictments were issued, and it was an amazing feeling to be around people who felt like somebody was gonna do something for them after having been ignored for so long. So thank you all very much for continuing to work on behalf of the people.
I have a quick question for Erica. And my personal memory of that uprising, I was actually in the Real News Network building during those days of the uprising, and there were people who came through that building, particularly media people from all over the world. I remember a Japanese film crew came in to do a special program on the Baltimore uprising. But in terms of the uprising, giving an impetus to the Black Lives Matter movement here in Baltimore, Erica, I wanted you to address that issue.
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, definitely the young people that led the uprising and Black Lives Matter movement, have obvious correlations. And I think that the Black Lives Matter movement grew even more as a result of uprisings both here and for Mike Brown. And I think that I think that Black Lives Matter had, at the same time that we had a rebellion here, Black Lives Matter had, things happening on the internet. They had a very different format from what we were accustomed to in terms of resistance. And I think that sort of covert way of organizing is something that we're seeing is working in terms of, a different generation. It's working as a way to stem COINTELPRO kind of, government watch, because they don't know, it's not as easy to infiltrate when you're working via technology. So I think, the Black Lives Matter movement, was something that, continued in part as a result of these uprisings, but, in tandem with them.
Yeah. Erica, I just had a quick question real quick. I was working at CBS News in Philadelphia actually at the time that this occurred, and we did a lot of coverage on it. A lot of the coverage, generally by the mainstream media at the time, I think could be critiqued in that it kind of vilified a lot of people in Baltimore for reasons that they didn't explain. Like, it just sounded like this uprising just kind of came out of nowhere from the way that the media sort of portrayed it, and that the people responsible for it didn't have any real reason for doing so, when the contrary was actually true once you kind of look at the situation and what had been transpiring for literally decades. So I'm just kind of curious how that media narrative, in terms of the mainstream media narrative, has changed and or kind of just went away entirely in the past 5 years. And what's your assessment of the differences between, the activist and left version of the media narrative of Freddie Gray and the uprising versus the mainstream media's characterization?
Yeah, I remember when Geraldo came and he was asking the most ridiculous questions. I remember Al Sharpton came, he got out of his limo, went right back in his limo, like 2 seconds, it was just a photo op. So, yeah, the mainstream media really had no idea what was going on in Baltimore. They didn't bother to ask. They didn't, because they have not been here asking in the same way that Katrina, that nobody knew what kind of the level of poverty, the level of systemic racism, the levels of, dysfunctional education that existed here. And that's something that, mainstream media could have been covering with the resources that they had, but they chose not to. So I think, it was interesting, even at the trial, like the first couple of days, there was all this excitement around the indictment. People were literally out celebrating with good reason, because it's a rarity that 6 police officers actually get indicted for killing an unarmed Black person. So, the first day of media, we had an overflow room. There were people lined up and, waiting to see the trial. And after, I'd say, maybe after that first trial was mistrial, then, national media started to dwindle. And they were also really clueless. Like, they would ask questions about, really, like, things that they could have researched about Baltimore easily. People that, people that were very well known in Baltimore that they didn't know. And so, they would ask all of the Baltimore-based journalists these questions. And it was just sort of, it all felt very surface. Like they weren't really interested in figuring out why this happened and, what were the real issues that would lead people to react in this way. So, it was a frustrating trial, and it was also equally frustrating the coverage of the media. And then, you had Stephanie Rollins Blake calling the kids thugs. You had who is the mayor of Baltimore City, and there was a disconnect there in terms of class issues and just the coverage today. I think like you said, it's the 5-year anniversary, and I think a lot of people have just forgotten what happened.
Tawanda, I wanted to ask a question of you, because in the aftermath of what happened to Freddie Gray and then the subsequent uprisings, Baltimore City Police were investigated. They were placed under a federal consent decree by the Department of Justice. But even since then, Baltimore City Police have been exposed as some of the most corrupt in the entire country, with a number of police officers being indicted on federal charges, including, robbing people, citizens, stealing drugs, selling drugs, and just being a general menace to society. And I certainly don't use that terminology lightly. So I'm curious, in your opinion, what has changed with police and the way that the police interact with city residents? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Or has it largely stayed the same in the past 5 years?
To me, I'm going to be totally honest. To me, it actually has gotten worse. It really has. And I mean, at the end of the day, until we hold folks accountable, nothing's going to get better. And it's just the only thing that I see that changed is now the things that my family and supporters were saying for years, right? When we first got out there, before the Freddie Gray situation, we were telling folks how corrupt the system was, how corrupt the officers that murdered my brother was, how they lied, how they were misleading, how, the whole report just came back. The whole investigation basically was a regurgitation of what the killer cop said. Nothing was transparent. So to me, it actually got worse. It's like at the end of the day, until you hold folks actually accountable, nothing's ever going to change.
Mm. Well said, and we're going to have to leave the conversation there. We've been joined with Tawanda Jones and Erica Blunt. We are premiering a documentary this Friday, 7 o'clock, right here on the Real News Channel, looking back 5 years since the Baltimore uprisings and the murder of Freddie Gray by Baltimore City Police. Ladies, thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And gang, we ran a little bit over, but from what I was told, I was told the chat was a rockin'. So everybody that stuck around.
This was a hell of a show. There were a lot of elements that all came together, and I got to say, kudos to Dwayne for pulling this off from a technical standpoint. There was a lot of stuff happening during the last hour.
When a party goes along, who complains?
Well, not at all. There's no complaint here, but it's a demonstration of the technical capabilities that we have at the Real News Network, and the journalistic talent that we have here too. So we have a solid team. It's a great team, and pulling together, we can really take this network into some new heights, I think. Yep.
I think so also. I want to thank the panel, Don Rojas, Andrew Corkery, Jacqueline Lukman. Since Don set it off, let me thank Dwayne Gladden, Adam Coley, Kelly McAdams, Taylor Hebden, James Daly, everybody that contributes to making Stir Crazy a thing, Charles Leshner as well. So yes, thank you very much to everybody. And thank y'all for tuning in. Duh. Y'all my favorite people. Everybody in the comments, everybody in the chat. Thank you guys. Keep it coming, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching Stir Crazy right here on the Real News Network.
Thank you, Kim. Great job.
See ya. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.